So first of all, like, can you introduce yourself for the audience in Taiwan?
Yes, good morning.
Morning.
In Taiwan, my name is Vince Anderson. I'm a sprint and hurdle coach in the United States. I've been coaching sprints and hurdles for 37 years. I coached at American universities for 34 of those years. I was 3 years at the University of Houston, 16 years at the University of Tennessee, and then I was 15 years at Texas A&M before up until 2019. And since 2019, I've been coaching independently. I'm now located in Houston, Texas, and I coach 7 athletes. They're all out of college trying to make their respective national teams.
Cool. That's some great schools.
Yes. I was very lucky to work there.
So for all those like coaching experience, is there like certain place you like the most?
That's a good question. I like both. I liked all 3 of them. Houston was in my hometown, and I'd never ventured out and lived anywhere else. And is also the first. I literally started coaching as a complete novice. I mean, a total inexperienced person. And so those 3 first years were very important to establishing a foundation. So I'm very fond of that for the beginning that it gave me. And then Tennessee was fantastic. I thought I had one of the 3 best jobs in the country. And then the chance to work at Texas A&M and come back to Texas and at a program that we thought had a lot of potential. That was also very exciting. So I've been lucky. I haven't worked at a whole lot of places, just 3, but they're each unique, if not equal in their. They all serve very important segments and parts of whatever it is that I've become. And I can't really see myself without any of those 3. So it's kind of very triangular that way.
Cool, man. Cool. Hope one day, as I like, one day if I have that much of a coaching experience, I hope I'm as great as you are.
Well, thank you. And I think what if I can do it, anyone can do it, because I was, like I say, I started out with no knowledge whatsoever. And I'm a product of coaches' education. Very knowledgeable and esteemed coaches taught me and were very generous with their knowledge. So I'm a big believer in the apprenticeship system. I think you can learn anything if you have the good fortune to be around someone who knows how to do something. And that doesn't matter if it's, making a movie or being a financial investor or making a pizza or working on an automobile. If you work with and under somebody who really knows what they're doing, the opportunity to accumulate a lot of knowledge is there.
Great. So I'm gonna jump into the question that talks about like speed training. Okay.
Yeah.
So like there's a lot going on in the industry right now. So a lot of coaches talk about like speed training, and team sport athlete always gonna be like training like acceleration. So when training acceleration, what are the few things you're gonna be looking at?
Well, first of all, 3 main things. One is very, very high intensity. Because the first problem with acceleration is people simply don't try hard enough. They're used to giving a certain amount of effort, and the amount of effort that people associate with acceleration is not nearly good enough. So you have to reset their physical level of exertion to where literally someone is pushing as hard as they can versus pushing as hard as they're used to. And those are two very big differences. Okay, so that's number one, intensity. Number two, duration. No one has ever pushed too hard that I've seen. I tell all my athletes, I'm waiting to say one day, hey, you pushed too hard. I've never seen that. I don't think it's possible. And I've also never heard anyone told you push too long. So not only do people not push hard enough at all or push hard enough initially, if they do push hard enough and they have a maximal extension from their very first step, then for sure they don't continue that maximal effort nearly long enough. So you're coaching both an increased intensity and an increased duration over which time that intensity remains being applied. Okay, the third thing that's required, and it's not really, you ask what three things I look for. I look mainly for those first two things. There's other more simple things, but, there's other more nuanced, subtle things, but I'm looking for intensity and duration of intensity. But to do that, for those things to be successfully explained by me and successfully learned by the athlete, I have to enlighten them on a very, very simple race plan. And that race plan should be the 100-meter acceleration pattern. So it doesn't matter if you're a soccer player or a track athlete or a basketball player. You need to train your athletes to run the 100 meters like Usain Bolt does or like Carl Lewis does. It doesn't matter that they're in another sport. Acceleration is acceleration is acceleration. And I understand there may be some sports like baseball or softball where acceleration is governed by a crossover step. But the only variance in the crossover step is that initial step. Once you step across from 0 to 1, it's exactly the same as a track and field acceleration. So acceleration is acceleration is acceleration. Quit making exceptions between a softball player's acceleration or a basketball player's acceleration or a football player's acceleration or a track athlete's acceleration. That they should all mimic the track athlete's acceleration. So the first thing you have to do is you have to take your athletes from other sports and have to teach them how to sprint forward in a straight line. Because if they then know that, you can transfer that skill into the specifics of their sport. But if you don't, if you say, well, we're softball players and we cross over, so we have nothing in common with Bolt, you'll never be as good as you can be. Now, the race pattern that I'm explaining to you also has to be made very, very simple. With track athletes, I can't speak for other sports because I don't coach other sports, so I'm not around a large population of people coaching those things. I'm mainly around track coaches. But one of the big problems in athletics is that the 100-meter acceleration pattern is explained at far too complicated a level. And there's an inverse relationship between complexity and intensity. The job of a very good coach teaching acceleration is to simplify the race plan and the objective so that athletes can be maximally intense for maximal duration. Because, like I say, if you give them, okay, there's a drive phase, there's a transition phase, there's a maximum velocity phase, there's a maintenance phase, and there's a deceleration phase. If you explain it to them like that, you'll get crap. Because even though those things exist when you're talking with a biomechanist, experientially, those athletes don't feel that. It's all pushing. So you have to very simplify the race plan so that the intensity can be increased, because the more complex the idea, the less aggressive the athlete will be. And I need unbelievable aggression.
Great. So you mentioned that there's those three things, like the first one is
intensity, duration of intensity, clear and simple explanation of a race plan.
Cool. So on the second one, you said that you never see an athlete like push how to
long enough.
Yeah. So if you like push long enough, does that change the rhythm of switching the leg?
Yes, it does, but you can't focus on that. All you have to focus on is pushing as hard as you can. And if you push as hard as you can, eventually you'll get vertical.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. Once you get vertical, you continue pushing. See, a lot of people get vertical and think that's the time that you stop pushing and start running. So, but you don't. The only thing that varies, when I'm in this body lean, I'm pushing that way. When I'm in this body lean, I'm pushing that way. When I'm vertical, I'm pushing that way. I push every ground contact. The only thing that changes is the direction of push, and the direction of push matches the post.
So if you like try to push as long as you can, so they will be able to stay at this angle as long as they can. So when they go vertical, they just push directly down.
Correct, because when I'm vertical, I have to push down to push myself up. It's the vertical component of sprinting. And I wouldn't say, like, what athletes have to concentrate on is pushing as hard as they can. All right. Now, I'm going to say this, and this is counterintuitive, but I'm going to try it anyway, and it'll confuse a lot of people. Okay. Maurice Green says, I stay down in my drive phase. Have you ever heard that before? Okay, he most certainly does not stay down in his drive phase. He rises continuously as he pushes. Now, I understand that he feels like he's staying down, but he's not. He's rising continuously with every step, and we have video analysis to show this. Okay, so first thing is do as Green says. Do as Green does, not as he says, because he's not staying down in his drive phase. So, all right, I'm explaining that to sort of set the tone what I'm about to say. Experientially, as near as I can figure, in talking to athletes, and I'm not a very good athlete at all. I was a terrible athlete. I could probably run the 112 flat, but I was an aware athlete. I could feel things. So even though I wasn't a good athlete, I was a kinesthetically aware athlete. And in talking to elite athletes and athletes, period, this is how I describe it. You have to push as hard as you can and not keep yourself down. Now, it's true that as they push, they rise, but they're not trying to rise. They're pushing as hard as they can and not trying to stay down. If you push as hard as you can and don't try to stay down, you will come up. So do we want them rising? Yes, but they're not trying to rise. They're trying to push as hard as they can and not keep themselves down. And this is a point of enormous confusion and difficulty.
Cool.
So if you just push as hard as you can and try not to stay down, you will rise continuously as you push.
Yeah. So also when you push as hard as you can and try to like stay down so the shin gets like more horizontal, the rhythm would probably be right?
Yes, resultantly. But remember, there has to be a very simple objective. You can't be thinking about how hard you're pushing, your body lean, your shin angle, if you're coming up or not. If I have a checklist of 5 things, it will not be a very aggressive run. So yes, all those things occur, but what happens if you push as hard as you can and you're striking back with your recovering shin, wherever the post is, those things will organically result.
Cool.
And when sprinters say, I stumbled, well, here's why they stumble. Nearly always it means they are pushing hard, but they're keeping their shoulders down. If you keep your shoulders down and push hard, you'll nose right over. And that's where the stumble comes from. People who accelerate well and push well and continue to rise never stumble.
Cool. Since then, why do you think that track coaches or like speed coaches, they try to like focus on switching these days?
Well, I think switching is a good thing if you have got the fundamentals in place. If a person is pushing very violently for 100 meters, then you can talk about switching, in my opinion. But I never, as a coach against myself and put minutia and smaller details in front of the more important things. We try to get the big chunks first. And if the big chunks are in order, I can start adding medium chunks. And when the medium chunks are in order, I can add small chunks. But what I see pedagogically, one of the reasons that so few people run hundreds well is that minutia is installed into the race plan, while big chunks and medium chunks haven't even been addressed.
Cool. Love this. Love this. Love this approach, man. So,
well, and here's why. It's like, this isn't stylistically like a bias of mine. I've just noticed in all sports, there's an inverse relationship between intensity and complexity. And I'm a fool as a coach if I introduced a level of complexity that degrades the intensity. I'm a fool to do that. So you must keep it simple until you have a degree of stability into which you can then ask more. But most people ask it's an event that gets grossly overcoached, in my opinion.
Yeah, agree with that. So that's acceleration, what we're talking about. So when it comes to like max velocity, is it the same that push as hard as you can?
Yes. Step down from above. Step down violently to push yourself up vertically. It's the vertical component of sprinting. Bolt is worried about going that way. He's not worried about going that way. He's just pushing down into the ground to push himself straight up. That's why great sprinters are so bouncy. It's the vertical component of sprinting. Once they've posted vertically, they're just step down from above to push themselves up.
So is there, like, besides the direction, is there anything different you're going to be looking at?
Well, no, not really. I obviously look at the I like to see the recovering shin angle. Excuse me, 1 minute. Let me get a photo here.
Okay.
Sorry.
No worries, man.
So I like to see at the strike position, the toe inside the knee.
Yeah.
But all he's doing, he's not swinging that foot out to make contact with the ground. He is driving that shin straight down into the ground like a hammer driving a nail. He's reversing his recovering shin into the ground through the axis of that shin. He's not casting open like an A skip or a B skip and pulling that ankle back. He's stepping straight down out of that. So what you're looking for, beautiful tall posture, big openness. Look how far the elbows are apart. look how much separation is between the thighs. I mean, you're looking for big, tall posture, stepping straight down out of that to push himself up.
Great. Get it, coach. So, the next thing I want to ask is, if I want to program if I want to plan out a acceleration session for a 100-meter athlete, let's say probably they just start the off season, start beginning of the training, start the season. So, what would the session be looking like?
It would be something like 2 sets of 10, 20, 30 in flats, front toe on the start line, not hands behind the start line, front toe on the start line, good on your mark and set position, no blocks, in flats, 2 sets of 10, 20, 30, or 3 sets of 10, 20, 30, maximal effort. Could do it in the grass, can do it on the track, doesn't matter. But what matters is that from the very first session, you're teaching the idea of intense acceleration mechanics.
So as time goes, when exactly would you probably let them wear spikes, and is the acceleration is the run per time, the distance gonna go longer?
Yes, of course. But athletes adapt to training stimulus about every 21 to 28 days. So about every 3 or 4 weeks, those 10, 20s, 30s might become 20, those 10, 20, 30s might become 20, 30, 40. But you're looking as a coach, 3 to 4 weeks is the adaptation period. And you're coaching with your eyes and you're looking at what's going on. And if after 3 weeks they've really stabilized, well, you can bump it up again. If not, wait another week or so. But you're coaching with your eyes. Like when a level of stability when a level of intensity or stability has met your expectations, then you can increase the training load or add complexity to the demand. But when you start out at the beginning of the year, you don't hit them with everything in the book that because it has to be simple. You're looking for intensity and duration of intensity. If it's a 30 and they push for 10, you're like, why did you stop pushing at 10? And if they're honest, they'll tell you, well, that's how long I pushed for. And you're like, there's nothing magic about the 10. You have to reset your effort and your expectation about how far to push for. I need you pushing for 100, not 10. And I know that we're only running 30s, but if we're running a 30 and you push for 10, that's not going to cut it. Because eventually these 10s and 20s and 30s are going to go away, and we're going to do 50s and 60s and 70s, or 70s and 80s and 90s. That's coming, and you're talking about it and preparing for it from the first day.
So how about how exactly would the whole session, how long does the whole session going to be like? I mean, distance.
Oh, okay. A whole session, by the time we warm up and by the time we finish, if it's probably 90 to an hour 45. But you ask another couple of questions. When would I go to spikes? Remember, there's never a point at which you just switch. You throw the switch and go completely from flats completely to spikes. All season long, we're bleeding in. The density changes. So we'd probably go about 4 weeks without spikes. And then in the 5th week, or maybe in the 4th week, we would begin introducing literally 2 reps or 4 reps in the entire week in spikes. In the following week, maybe 4 to 6 reps, and so forth. And then, but even in the peak of the outdoor season, every rep isn't in spikes. We're always managing that. Most of them are, but it might be the inverse. In the peak of the competitive season, everything might be in spikes except 2 to 4 reps, which are in flats. It's just the inverse is the first week. So that's bled very carefully based on how you're gradually progressing the work. And remember, one important principle of training is gradual progression.
How about the total distance about the acceleration sessions?
Well, the acceleration session should be, the literature says between 120 and 500 meters, but I promise 500 meters is a lot. Like if you did 10 times 50 meters, you really can't do that maximally, and you certainly can't do that early in the season. So if you were to have 500 meters in a speed development or acceleration development session, that would be for very experienced athletes, very, very late in the year. And you're not going to be in that kind of training load for very long. That might be one kind of training load you introduce for a 21 to 28 day period, very, very late in the year, probably a month to 6 weeks before your primary meet goal.
Cool. So
because when you're working at the higher end of any responsible training category, so when you're looking at the high end, you have to allow recovery time on the backside of that.
Yeah. Great. So that's like acceleration session. How about like max velocity sessions?
Max velocity session is the same. It's about 120 to 500 meters max. And again, 500 meters would be a lot. That would be a very high training age elite athlete capable of those kind of volumes. And again, when you expose them to that, when you're at the maximum end of that, above, say 350 to 500 meters, like you better know what you're doing, and you better be allowing recovery on the backside of that.
So I thought max velocity sessions would be longer.
No, because if they are okay, you have to be honest. Max velocity means max velocity. Max velocity means as fast as you can go, as hard as you can go. Now, if a person really does that, like they can't do a whole lot, because it's just like you can't do 20 times 1 rep max in the weight room. I mean, you might be able to do one rep max in the weight room that's max, or 2. Like if the intensity is that high, you can't do a lot of them. It's the same idea. Now the key is if they really are maximal. Now, if someone is taking a maximum velocity workout and running, sub-maximally, like they're getting that volume in, but not at the load you demanded. So max velocity work requires lots of rest between the reps and lots of rest after the session.
Cool. Great.
If it really is at the intensity that you're scripting.
Yeah, get it. So in Taiwan, the track season would look like probably there's an event like every month, and that's probably going to continue like 6 or 8 months. And every event they probably have.
Wait, repeat. There's a what every month? A track meet?
Yeah.
Okay.
And whenever there's an event, they're probably gonna, if the athlete run fast enough, they're probably gonna run two or 3 days in a row. That's like the track season in Taiwan. How about what's the track season in the state looks like?
Well, it depends on, first of all, like the college season lasts from that. There's an indoor season followed by an outdoor season, and they run right together. There's no big gap between them. One is the NCAA indoor meet is the second week in March, and the first outdoor meets are the third weekend in March. So they run right into each other. So that's a 42-week season, with the first competition starting about week 21 and the last competition being at week 42. So you have about a 22-week season from January to June. And if you go later than that to USAs or into the World Championships, which obviously the elite collegians do, I mean, it becomes even, becomes a 48 or 50-week season. Most high school seasons are between 12 and 16 weeks. Now, where that varies from state to state and region to region is that some states are very restrictive about being able to train in the fall. Like, you can't do that in most states. Like, in most states, there's a few you can. If you have a physical education period, you can actually train your track athletes in physical education period in the fall semester because, for a spring sport. But a lot of states don't even allow that. Like, literally, they allow no coaches contacts with athletes at all to conduct skill sessions in that sport. So most high school calendars are, they're starting practice in January, and their season is starting sometime in late February or early March and going through mid-May or early June. And obviously the further north you go, the later that start is, because like New York has their state meet, I think in the first or second week of June, and Texas has their state meet, we're very far south, in May. Georgia has their state meet in the first week in May. So the further south you are, the earlier the meets start and the sooner they end. The further north you are, to allow it to get a little warmer, the later it starts and the later they end. But you're talking about 12 to 16 meets. So you have everything in between. You have most coaches dealing with a 12 to 16 week season, some with very little general preparation allowed before that. And then you have a collegiate season where you can start training in September and go all the way through June or beyond, training the whole way. So, good coaches manage their calendar. It's often said, well, what's the best time to get in the weight room? Well, when you're allowed in there is the best time, because a lot of track coaches in the United States can't get in the weight room when they want. They have to get in there at 6 a.m. or, on their lunch break or whatever. So you make it work around what you have. Well, that's the way the track season is. Really good coaches who have a 12-week season, they make it work. Really good coaches who have a 48-week season make it work. Like, good coaches adapt to what the parameters are. I would never say break rank and cheat or extend a, like, if you can't train in the fall and that's the rule, well, follow the rules. But good coaches aren't worried about what they can do. They're worried about what they, good coaches aren't worried about what they cannot do. They're worried about what they can do, and they maximize those things to the best possible effect in their particular circumstance.
So instead of focusing on like probably what they want to do, they should be focusing what they can do, right?
Yes, or I would go maybe even one step further, focus on what they can do well, what they understand, what they're good at, what needs to be done, like coach to your strengths.
So for those like season, for like the college season, you mentioned like there's like 22 or 24 weeks season, right?
Yes.
How exactly like is the, let's say, how often do they have to run during the season?
That varies somewhat, but I would say that the people who run least run every other week. And the people who run the most run, they might run 18 to 20 meets in that 22 to 24 week period.
So since then, how do you like program the sprint training?
Well, you program sprint training by, Coach Paff, Coach Sheck Snyder, rest has to be a planned, progressive part of the training plan. Like you have to plan rest just like you do work. And the rest that you plan has to be well balanced with the kind of work you're prescribing. So if you take any given amount of work or any given amount of intensity, the amount of rest you give should be just right. Not too much, not too little, just right. We call it the Goldilocks principle. Not too hot, not too cold, just right. So, and that's true in the session, it's true in the week, and it's true in the macro cycle. It's true in the overall year. The rest, as you get better and better and better at coaching, the rest that you prescribe should be more and more and more perfectly appropriate to the work you prescribe.
So is there
the amount of work and the intensity of work you do has an optimal amount of rest. You don't want to give less than that. You don't want to give more than that. You want to, and good coaches really tend to get that balance right.
So is there like certain, like probably after the race, they probably gonna like rest like 1 or 2 days or probably even 3 days?
It depends, because not all meets are like, you can have a hard meet just like you can have a hard training session.
Yeah.
And you can have a meet where you're unloading just like you can have a training session where you're unloading. So let's say for an athlete who's going to run the 4x100 and the 100 and the 200 at their regional championships, and you go to track meet and they only run the 4x100, that's a meet where you deliberately didn't triple them. So that meet is kind of even though it's a competition, it's a relatively light competition when compared to the championship meet regimen that they're going to have to do. So in that instance, maybe, obviously the day after the meet, they probably rest. Let's say they run on a Saturday, the 4x1, and they have complete rest Sunday, and they can probably go right back to training on Monday, obviously depending on what the rest of that training schedule was like. But the amount of rest that a person would get after a track meet would be relative to how hard they ran at the track meet. After conference championships and NCAA championship, we give our athletes 2 to 4 days off, or 2 to 4 days of very, very regenerative activity. We don't give them 4 complete days off. Like NCAAs end on a Saturday, so Sunday might be completely off and we're traveling. Okay. Monday, we don't do anything. Tuesday, maybe we just have a light warm up and a very downgraded strength session. And then maybe the 4th day, we actually start training again. So all of those decisions are made based on the totality of the season up to that point and what you planned in. And again, how they're looking, because you're looking at you're watching them, did you script this right? Did I give them too much? Oops, I need to give them more rest because this was harder on them than I thought. Or they're handling this better than I thought. I can resume normal training sooner. That didn't take as much out of them as I imagined. Because you always have to be using your eyes to determine if what you intended is happening.
Great.
You can't just put your nose down. You can't just put blinders on and put your nose down and just blow through your training plan like everything's okay, because everything might be okay. but everything may not be okay either. And you have to be able to see that and make adjustments. And good coaches do that.
Great. Love that. That's about all the questions I have for today. Sorry I didn't follow the question list. I sent it to you.
No, that was pretty close. That as I remember reading it, that was pretty darn close.
Appreciate that, man. So if there's like coaches or therapists in Taiwan, they are interested in what we're talking about today, where can they reach out to you?
Well, the best way to do it, and hopefully I don't mind answering questions. I hope we don't get inundated with 500 questions, but the best way to get a hold of me is through email. And my email is hurdle sprint, one word, HURDLESPRINT@gmail.com, all lowercase.
Okay, cool. So appreciate for the time, Coach.
Yeah, what's the weather like in Taiwan?
It's raining outside, and it's cold.
What's the temperature?
Let me check. It's 19 degrees Celsius. So
ooh, that's pretty cold.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Eric, it's been great talking with you. Anything else you want to discuss while we're here, or
wait.